Hi everyone, I welcome you all to the second session in Project Asari's 15-week program, and today is the second session in week 1. Today is going to be a working session, that is to say that we will be working on whatever we've learned yesterday. So working sessions are going to be held every week, that is on Sundays, because on Saturday we'll be building up theory and all the concepts that will be required for you to apply this knowledge and work in the working session. So, in today's session, your first task is to research on the role of students in political movements. You have exactly 15 minutes to research, so keep your cameras on at all times. A timer will be flashing on the screen, and use of AI is, of course, strictly prohibited, but internet can be used. Now, we learned yesterday how to research for any kind of speech. So, of course, role of students in political movements. I don't know if you've ever heard about a topic like that, but the keywords in this topic are pretty easy, and these are topics that you might, these are keywords that you might have already heard about. So, again, as I told you how to research for a speech, just keep those points in mind, keep those steps in mind, and I think you'll be able to crack this topic. Now, because I think you'll be researching for a particular topic first time in a time which is as less as 15 minutes, so I think you can use the following structure. It is just a potential structure. You can, of course, make changes according to your own use or according to your own choice. So for the first 15 minutes, so for the first 5 minutes, try to write what you already know about that topic. All right, once you do that, spend the next 10 minutes to search for the keywords and making notes of all the new information. For example, whatever you know about this particular topic or the keywords in this topic, just write everything about that and then search for the keywords and make notes of new information, and keep on repeating this process until you think you have enough material. Now, enough material over here is very subjective, because I think I'm not really going to tell you how to define enough material, because that is your task to do. So just I'll give you a very small hint. Find material that you think will be able to cover your short speech, your beginning, conclusion, and the main body in your short speech. So I'll be beginning with the timer in just a minute, but before that, do you have any question about the topic or the research that you have to do in the next 15 minutes?
No.
All right, so I'll begin with the timer. Just okay. First of all, how was the experience of like researching? Was it your first time researching in a short amount, or was it fine?
It's not my first time researching, but it was my first time researching in a limited time.
Okay,
Because
so
usually we can.
so how did you
So how did
manage?
you? So basically, I knew the facts about this topic, but I didn't know the examples,
Yeah.
and so that's basically the thing I searched the most,
Okay.
and that was pretty long. Took
Yeah,
a lot of my time.
definitely. I can understand.
I can understand.
All right. So
All
now that you've you're
you've
done with the.
done,
Can you
with
please mute yourself?
these news.
Okay, thank you so much. Now that you're done with the first task, your second task is that using your research, you now have exactly 15 minutes to write a 2-minute speech using the structure that has been given to you. And this task will be followed by a feedback, and your feedback will depend upon three parameters, and they are the quality of your research, how have you structured your speech, and thirdly, the quality of your content. And I feel 15 minutes, I think, would be more than enough to write a 2-minute speech. And make sure that when you write your speech, don't write it word to word. Get into a habit of writing just keywords, and when you're speaking, just try to add all those auxiliary verbs and all the verbs, because honestly, we're all English speaking students, and it'll be easy for us to just look at the keywords and start speaking. And that is why I'm giving you a small amount of time, because you might already have a lot of content. Again, I'll be flashing the timer on the screen. All right, now that you've written your speech and you've researched everything, your timer will start the moment I say 3, 2, 1. Just make sure that we'll be following the structure that is followed at national and international circuits, where you cannot go beyond 2 minutes. However, you still have a 15-second gap. That is to say, you can speak either 15 minutes less or 15 seconds less or 15 seconds more than the desired time, but anything spoken after or below anything spoken after 2 minutes and 15 seconds will not be counted. Hence your speaking time remains between 1 minute 45 seconds to 2 minute 15 seconds, and your time for speaking begins in 3, 2, and 1.
Good evening to all youngsters and veterans of the nation. Today, I, Abir, am going to share my views on the topic Role of Students in Political Movements. Students play and have been playing a key role in political movements and social reforms. Students may look inexperienced and out of their mind at first glance, but being the future of our planet, they know exactly what they need in the present and what is required for the future. Students are the absolute first to embrace emerging political ideologies as they feel the most change due to the fact they've seen so little. This generation's students are much more capable and talented than their ancestors due to the assistance of technology and a strong sense of independence. So they can easily understand what is required, and through strikes and protests, they can bring a change in political reforms. There have been various examples in the past, a notable one being the Quit India movement in India. Indian students strongly protested against the British education system, and Britain influenced schools, colleges, and universities, which was hindering their cultural growth and, in the long run, created an inferiority complex among Indian students. Their actions allowed India to be free again, and now they could act according to their appropriate needs. Thus, students are not to be underestimated, as they are the heirs to the throne and can differentiate between right and wrong. Thank you.
All right, so that was 1 minute and 15 seconds. I'll just prepare your feedback maybe in 2 to 3 minutes. By that time, if you want to grab a glass of water, you can. So I would highly recommend, if there's a point that I speak and you think it is important and will be important for your future improvement, you can definitely write it. Now, I have judged you based on 3 parameters, that is research, structure, and the quality of your content. So first, let's talk about research. I think your research was pretty average. Why do I say so? Because you just gave me one example, and that was an example from history, that is the Quit India movement. However, it was a very impactful example, but you could have used it in a much better way, and I'll tell you how you could have used that example in a much better way. Still, I would consider that example as a good example, because you told me how in Quit India movement the British how students protested against the education system that was prevailing here in India, because they might have found it discriminatory, or a system that was not conditioned according to their needs. So it is still a valid example, but could have been elaborated in a much better way, because you still had like a minute left to speak. Secondly, I think the recency of your examples was lacking. I was expecting you to write I was expecting you to give me a lot of examples, which you could have given me very easily, because my reason of actually giving you this topic, that is the role of students in political movements, was actually because it is something, a trend we've seen rising in the recent past, because in the recent past, because students are like, you've mentioned in your speech multiple times how students are the drivers of change, because they'll be the heirs of the future generation and all the future problems that are ongoing, right? So I think you could have given us so many more examples. For example, did you hear about the July uprising that happened in Bangladesh last year, where okay, you haven't heard about it, no problem, I'll just give a very small explanation to you. So the July uprising in Bangladesh happened because the students, the youth essentially over there, was really disappointed in the government because of the rising rates of unemployment and corruption. And it was really just because the grassroots organization of that country was really despotic, and the students, the youth, was not really happy with the kind of government that that country had. So that just culminated into a huge protest. If you want, you can definitely read a lot about that, because there's a lot of news out there. Then secondly, what happened in Nepal last year, Bangladesh was 2 years ago, sorry. What happened in Nepal last year, I think Nepal was very recent, so I don't know if you know about it. Again, in Nepal also, the youth, they got to the streets, they burned the parliament down, because again they were unhappy with the government. You see, again here, this entire thing was against the government. It was a big political movement against the government. Why? Because the youth, the students, were unhappy with whatever was happening to them, right? Again, you could have given me this example because it was very recent. And thirdly, you could have given me the example of India, but you gave me an example of India, but that was from history, which is totally fine. However, what is happening in India? Have you heard about the Cockroach Janta Party in the last 2 to 3 days? Have you heard about it?
I have heard about it, but I haven't read about it.
All right, yeah. So, see, again, the thing about the Cockroach Janta Party is, if you see it from um, a psychological, or if you see it from a student point of view, it is again a revolution against the government, because after years of being quiet, after years of handling and absorbing so much disappointment and so much dejection and so many problems by the government, the Indian youth has risen up, and they've created this political movement around the government so that they can barricade whatever bad that the government has done to them. So I think you could work more on citing better examples, all right? Because I think examples are so important in building up your content, and this also shows how you should get into the habit of reading news, or just keeping in mind whatever is going around you, because I think a lot of things that are going around you will actually help you build better content. And secondly, I really want to talk about is verbal citation. Do you know what citation is?
No.
Okay, so citation is something that you actually use to tell from which source you have taken that particular thing. For example, you've heard about newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Tribune, the Hindu, right? Now, all of these newspapers, they have a lot of good information in them. So, for example, you read a particular article on the New York Times and you find something really interesting from that article. In your speech, you can add that by saying, because according to a New York Times article, this happened, and hence this proves why this is so important. Because when you give verbal citations, when you clearly cite the resource from where that information was taken, it adds credibility to your entire speech, because it shows that, oh, you have actually thoroughly researched about your speech, and this is how you've gained your information. So in research, I just want you to use more examples and use credible examples so that it can help you make your speech better. And thirdly, if you're using examples, get into a habit of explaining those examples and connecting it back to whatever you're trying to speak. Secondly is structure. Again, I think your structure was a little bit above average. Why do I say so? Because I think firstly, there was there you I think the beginning, because the beginning that you spoke was actually good, but it was really generic. You could have started your beginning with a really interesting stat. You could have started the beginning with a really good example. In fact, you could have used the Quit India movement example in the beginning by saying, do you know that in the British history, during the Quit India movement, whatever your example was, you could have begun with that. Because the thing with greetings everyone, I am this, at national and international circuits, this is not going to work, because everybody is going to know your name. You really don't need to speak it again. So it would have been better if you used anecdotes or all those things that I mentioned to you yesterday. Secondly is thesis. This is something we haven't talked about, but a thesis is a statement. It is a very clear statement that you give in the beginning of your speech that tells the audience that, oh, this is what the speaker is going to talk about. Now I think you did a good job in thesis. Why? Because I think there was a particular line that I really liked. You said that a lot of people think that the youth is inexperienced, however they don't understand that they're drivers of change, and hence it is very important that they should be involved in such political movements. Now this is your thesis because you were very clear with whatever you're going to speak, and I as a listener and I as a judge was able to understand that, oh, this is what this person is going to speak about for the rest of their speech. So I think really good job there. However, you can obviously, there's a lot of ways you can refine your thesis as well, that we'll be talking in the next week's sessions. Secondly, about signposting. Signposting only comes if you have a good structure, and I think your speech lagged structure. As I was saying, so your speech, I think, lagged structure. Why is that so? Because your speech was spoken in a very, like, as if you were telling someone that, oh, this is the importance of having students in political movements, which is fine, which is perfectly fine. However, there should have been a better structure that you could have used. Why do I say this, that your structure was important? Because you were just telling me that, oh, you, even though youth is experienced, they are drivers of change, their future is important for our country, that's why we should involve them in political movements. That is fine, but that is not enough at all. You should be more explanatory. All right, you have to tell me the why is that the youth is so important, why is their future so important. Connect everything, explain as much as you can. And you know what, although it was a 2-minute speech, I agree the time was less, but you could have used it much more judiciously, right? You could have just given me one argument and explained it to me very, very nicely. For example, I just wrote it for you. Now you gave me just one example, right? I'll just take your queries after the feedback. Now, for example, you just gave you gave me just one example on Quit India movement, right? Now you could have used this particular structure to not only explain me the example but also your statement. So you could have started with something like, students play a huge role, not started with this, but this could have been your main body. Again, this is just an example, you can refine it. Students play a huge role in seeking justice. This was the statement. Explanation: because they are directly affected by recent policies of the government and their future, and they are the heirs of the future, and and play a huge role in forming one of the biggest resources of human capital. It is essential that their choices, that their rights are considered to be the most important when governments are making policies. And when governments are making policies, it is really essential that they keep in mind all the needs, so that the youth is actually satisfied with whatever they are getting from the government, so that they do not get involved in a political uprising. Now, history has shown us many examples, but one of the most notable examples was the Quit India movement, where the students where the students protested against the British education system. So this is how you could have connected it in a much better way and then given me a conclusion. Hence, it is whatever you want to write. All right, so this is all that I had about your feedback. So just summarizing it really quickly, overall it was a great speech. It was a little bit above average, but I'm not saying it was above average. It was a little bit above average. Why is that so? Because I think you could have used your research time in a much better way by finding more recent examples, by finding more credible examples. By credible examples, I mean by finding examples from good sources, whatever sources are out there. There's so many resources, right? Thirdly, I think you could have done a better job at your structure, that is, be more explanatory. I am pretty sure that a lot of because the thing is that we as students, even if you're told about public speaking, we're just told about public speaking in a very bad way. We're just told that, oh, you have to be very good at expressions, you have to do a lot of voice modulation. When at international and national circuits, it hardly matters. Of course it matters, but what matters more is your content. So it is really important that you explain a lot. Think of the audience as if they don't know anything. All right, so just be as explanatory as you can and follow a clear structure. And yes, that was all from my side. I hope you did learn something from whatever feedback that I've given you, and if you have any queries, I'm happy to help you.
Actually, when I first looked at my paragraph, I thought that it would exceed 2 minutes.
Oh,
So
all
I
right.
think I cut like 2 lines,
Oh,
which I think is like an explanation because I wrote their energy and motivation is also crucial to bring changes to political ideologies that they oppose. This was like one of the lines that I cut.
all right, perfect. So the thing is that never cut before you begin your speech. I'll tell you, I am the worst person you'll ever meet in managing my time. I always exceed my time. But of course, the judges don't penalize you. So, like, biggest tip, never try to cut your speech before you've even spoken it. Because the thing is that even if, like, I say time is over, you can quickly say whatever your last line, whatever your last word is, and say thank you. Because it's again, it's better to say more than saying less, right? So, yeah, so this was all I had. Again, if you want any clarification in your feedback, I'm happy to give.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Abir. I really hope that you did find something interesting and important to learn in these 2 days, and I hope that you will join us for the next weeks as well. Because from next week, we're going to cover something that will be totally new to you, and very sure that, and I'm pretty sure that you will be enjoying that too.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.